Every prepper has the same list: rice, beans, canned goods, freeze-dried everything. And those are all fine. Nobody's arguing against rice. But if your entire emergency food plan is built on what every YouTube prepper has been recommending since 2012, you might be missing some genuinely powerful options that have fed people through wars, polar expeditions, ocean crossings, and famines. These are the 10 survival foods even the best preppers don't know about. Food 10. Nutritional yeast. This one looks like fish food, smells like cheese, and has no obvious place in the average American's pantry, which is exactly why it belongs on this list. Nutritional yeast is a deactivated form of Saccharomyces cerevisiae, the same species of yeast used in baking and brewing, just grown specifically for nutritional purposes, then dried and deactivated with heat. It comes in yellow flakes or powder and has a strong, savory, distinctly cheesy flavor that has made it a staple in vegan cooking as a Parmesan substitute. That's mostly how people know it. That's not why it belongs in your prep. Here's the actual value. A 2 tablespoon serving of nutritional yeast typically contains around 8 grams of complete protein, meaning it contains all 9 essential amino acids your body needs but can't produce on its own. It's also loaded with B vitamins, including B1, B2, B3, B6, and in many fortified versions, B12, a vitamin that is notoriously difficult to obtain from non-animal sources. For anyone whose emergency food plan leans heavily on grains and legumes, the B12 gap is a real problem. A B12 deficiency doesn't announce itself dramatically. It builds gradually over months, causing fatigue, nerve damage, and cognitive impairment before most people realize what's happening. Nutritional yeast closes that gap cheaply and efficiently. It has a shelf life of roughly 2 years in a sealed container, kept away from heat and moisture. It's lightweight, compact, and easy to use. You can sprinkle it on anything, stir it into soups, mix it into hardtack dough, or just eat it straight off a spoon if things have gotten to that point. A large canister costs around $10 to $15 and adds protein and a full B vitamin complex to whatever else you're eating. Most preppers focus their vitamin concerns on multivitamin tablets, which is fine as a backup. But multivitamins have their own shelf life concerns. Certain vitamins, particularly B12, degrade over time, and a capsule that sat in storage for 5 years may not deliver what the label says. Getting your B vitamins from actual food you can taste, cook with, and verify, is a significantly more reliable approach. Nutritional yeast stores well, weighs almost nothing, and makes the rest of your survival food taste less terrible. That last part matters more than most people admit when they're building their list in the comfort of a functioning grocery system. Food 9. Pemmican. Pemmican has been around for centuries, is nutritionally one of the most complete portable foods ever developed, and yet most of the people who know about it the way you know about something from a history class. Interesting, ancient, not really relevant. That's a significant underestimation. The word pemmican comes from the Cree word Pemmican, derived from the word for fat or grease. Indigenous peoples of North America, particularly the Cree, Métis, and Blackfoot nations, developed it as a travel food that could be carried long distances on horseback or by canoe, withstand extreme weather, and provide enough caloric density to sustain hard physical labor without refrigeration. The concept is simple: dried, powdered lean meat, traditionally bison or venison, mixed with rendered animal fat and sometimes dried berries, then pressed into compact cakes or balls. That's the entire recipe. The nutritional profile is extraordinary. Fat provides caloric density, protein from the meat maintains muscle and organ function, and the berries add vitamins and carbohydrates. Explorers Lewis and Clark carried pemmican on their expedition. Arctic and Antarctic expeditions in the 19th and 20th centuries stocked it as primary rations precisely because nothing else could deliver that caloric density in that weight and volume without spoiling. The shelf life, if made properly, is measured in years. There are documented cases of pemmican lasting decades in cold, dry conditions. In warm climates, it degrades faster, but properly prepared and sealed, it reliably stores for 3 to 5 years. And historical examples of much longer survival exist. 1 pound of pemmican delivers approximately 3,500 calories and roughly 100 grams each of fat and protein. For context, that's about 1.5 days of full caloric needs in 1 pound of food that requires no refrigeration and no cooking. As food historian Max Miller noted about pemmican, there is as much nourishment in 1 pound of pemmican as in 4 pounds of ordinary meat. That ratio is why it was the backbone of some of the most grueling expeditions in history, and it's why any serious long-term food plan that ignores it is leaving a significant advantage on the table. Food 8, hardtack. If pemmican is the overlooked powerhouse, hardtack is the overlooked staple. It's been dismissed as survival cracker and associated with Civil War history museums, which does it a disservice. Hardtack is essentially a storage-stable form of bread that can outlast almost everything else in your pantry by decades. 3 ingredients: flour, water, salt. That's it. Combined, kneaded, rolled flat, perforated with holes to allow steam to escape during baking, and baked at high heat until it's completely moisture-free. The result is a dense, hard biscuit that is genuinely difficult to eat without soaking first, which is how soldiers and sailors historically consumed it, dunked in water, coffee, soup, or broth until softened enough to chew. The perforations were functional, not decorative. They helped bake it evenly, and the resulting holes allowed any moisture that entered storage to potentially leave rather than cause mold. The shelf life is legitimately remarkable. Manassas National Battlefield Park has Civil War-era hardtack on display that is over 150 years old. It isn't edible at that age, but the structure is intact, which speaks to how little moisture it contains when properly made and stored. Contemporary hardtack stored in a cool, dry, airtight container can remain edible for decades. 1 piece of standard hardtack made with all-purpose flour provides about 100 calories and 16 grams of carbohydrates. It won't sustain you alone indefinitely. There's not enough protein or fat, but as a carbohydrate base alongside pemmican, dried lentils, or canned protein, it provides an extremely cheap, extremely stable caloric foundation. The ingredients cost almost nothing. A large batch can be made in under an hour. It is, in a specific sense, the original survival food of the modern era, used by Columbus, Napoleon's armies, the Union and Confederate soldiers, Royal Navy sailors, and frontier settlers. The fact that almost nobody under 50 knows how to make hardtack, or that it's even still relevant, is genuinely baffling. Food 7, dried lentils. This one might seem obvious, but most preppers reach for rice and beans so automatically that lentils get overlooked despite being superior in several meaningful ways. Lentils are a legume, same family as chickpeas, kidney beans, and peas, but with distinct advantages for emergency food storage. They don't require soaking before cooking, unlike most dried beans. They cook in about 20 to 30 minutes, compared to the hour-plus required for dried beans that have been soaked. In a situation where you're managing fuel carefully, a camping stove, a wood fire, limited propane, that time and fuel difference matters substantially. Nutritionally, dried lentils are a powerhouse. A single cup of cooked lentils provides approximately 18 grams of protein, 40 grams of carbohydrates, and 16 grams of dietary fiber, along with significant amounts of iron, folate, potassium, and manganese. They're incomplete protein on their own. They're low in the amino acid methionine, but combined with any grain, they form a complete protein. Rice and lentils eaten together provide essentially everything the human body needs for protein synthesis. The shelf life is exceptional. Dried lentils stored in a sealed container with oxygen absorbers in a cool, dry location can remain edible for up to 25 to 30 years. Even in ordinary pantry conditions, they last at least 5 years without significant nutritional degradation. They're also one of the most calorie-dense foods per dollar available in a standard grocery store, roughly 1,100 calories per pound at a cost of less than $2. The whole lentil, not split lentils, stores the longest because the intact seed coat prevents oxidation. If you're sealing them for long-term storage in Mylar bags with oxygen absorbers, use whole green or brown lentils rather than the pre-split red lentils, which have a shorter shelf life due to the increased exposed surface area. Food 6, ghee. Ghee is clarified butter. Butter from which all the water and milk solids have been removed through a careful heating and straining process. What's left is essentially pure butterfat, and that distinction matters enormously for survival food purposes. Regular butter spoils because of its water content and its milk proteins, which support bacterial growth. Remove those, and you get a cooking fat with dramatically extended shelf life. Properly made and sealed ghee stored in a cool, dark location can remain shelf-stable for 1 to 2 years without refrigeration. Kept in a refrigerator or cool cellar, it lasts considerably longer. Commercially produced ghee in sealed tins has been tested and found usable at 5 years and beyond. From a survival standpoint, fat is essential for several reasons that go beyond simple taste. Your body requires fat to absorb fat-soluble vitamins A, D, E, and K, which means that even if you're eating foods containing these vitamins without sufficient dietary fat, you can't effectively use them. Fat also provides the highest caloric density of any macronutrient at 9 calories per gram, versus 4 for both carbohydrates and protein. In a scenario where caloric intake is uncertain, which is the nature of any genuine emergency, a jar of ghee is one of the most compact ways to add caloric density to every meal you eat. Ghee has been a staple of South Asian and Middle Eastern food preservation traditions for centuries, specifically because of its stability in warm climates without refrigeration. In regions where a dairy cow was a valuable asset, but dairy spoilage was a constant risk, clarifying the butter into ghee was the obvious solution. It preserved the caloric value of the dairy while removing the elements that caused it to go bad. The technique is ancient, proven, and genuinely applicable to modern emergency food planning. It has a high smoke point, around 485 degrees Fahrenheit, making it suitable for high-heat cooking over a fire or camp stove without burning. Unlike refined vegetable oils, which go rancid relatively quickly once opened and can produce harmful compounds when overheated repeatedly, ghee is stable, well understood, and has a track record measured in millennia rather than decades. Ghee can be made at home from ordinary unsalted butter in about 30 minutes, a simple process of simmering until the water evaporates and the milk solids separate, and can be strained off. It can also be purchased in sealed cans at most grocery stores, Indian markets, or online for a very reasonable price. A 28-ounce tin costs roughly $10 to $15, and provides a substantial quantity of shelf-stable cooking fat. It is one of the most underrated and consistently overlooked items in any serious long-term food storage plan. Food 5. Canned coconut milk. Most preppers think about macronutrients and calories. Most preppers don't think very hard about cooking. That's a problem that canned coconut milk solves quietly and efficiently. Canned coconut milk, the full-fat variety, not the refrigerated coconut beverage, has a shelf life of 2 to 5 years, is dense with calories and healthy fats, and functions as a versatile cooking liquid that can replace dairy in virtually any recipe. One 13-ounce can contains roughly 400 to 500 calories and about 40 to 45 grams of fat, the majority of which are medium-chain triglycerides, MCTs, a form of saturated fat that the body metabolizes more readily than long-chain fats for quick energy. The coconut milk case for survival food isn't complicated. When you're eating primarily grains, legumes, and preserved protein for an extended period, the absence of fat, real, palatable, useful fat, makes everything harder. Morale drops. Cooking becomes monotonous. Coconut milk adds richness to soups, stews, porridge, and rice dishes in a way that dramatically improves the palatability of everything around it. There's a reason it's the base of a huge range of South and Southeast Asian cooking traditions that were developed in environments where fresh dairy was scarce. It's also a genuine caloric source, not just a flavor enhancer. A can of coconut milk added to a pot of lentils or rice raises the caloric content of the meal substantially. In a situation where people are doing hard physical work, rebuilding, gardening, hauling, moving, caloric density matters in ways that become apparent very quickly when you don't have enough of it. A case of canned coconut milk costs around $25 to $30. It stores at room temperature indefinitely until opened. It's available at every grocery store, and it is almost never on any prepper's list, which is exactly why it should be on yours. Food 4. Spirulina. Here is where we get into territory that might cause some eye-rolling, and that's fine. Bear with it for a moment. Spirulina is a blue-green algae, technically a cyanobacterium, that has been consumed by humans for a very long time. The Aztecs harvested it from Lake Texcoco and dried it into cakes. The Kanembu people of Chad around Lake Chad have used it as a major food source for centuries. In modern nutrition science, it's studied primarily as a supplement, and in the survival food community, it's treated mostly as something for health food enthusiasts. That framing undersells it dramatically. By dry weight, spirulina is approximately 60 to 70% protein, making it one of the highest protein foods on Earth. More importantly, for survival purposes, it contains all essential amino acids, making it a complete protein. It's also rich in iron, B vitamins, beta-carotene, which the body converts to vitamin A, and various antioxidants. A single tablespoon of dried spirulina powder, weighing about 7 grams, provides 4 grams of complete protein, along with meaningful amounts of iron and B vitamins. The practical advantages for a prepper are significant. Dried spirulina powder stores for 2 to 3 years in a sealed container. It weighs almost nothing. A 1-pound bag of spirulina powder is roughly the size of a large coffee bag and contains hundreds of servings. It can be mixed into water, added to any liquid food, stirred into soups, or taken straight. It requires no cooking, no preparation, and no fuel. And as a protein and micronutrient supplement layered on top of whatever else you're eating, it closes nutritional gaps that grain and legume-heavy diets create in ways that are genuinely hard to replicate with other shelf-stable foods. The NASA Advanced Life Support Program and the European Space Agency have both studied spirulina as part of long-duration space nutrition research, specifically because of its extraordinary nutrient density per unit of weight. Researchers designing food systems for people who will be in space for months or years, people who cannot simply add more weight to their supply, gravitate toward foods where the nutritional return per gram is maximized. Spirulina scores exceptionally well by that metric. If that standard of research is paying attention to it, preppers probably should too. It's available at most health food stores, many mainstream grocery stores, and online at reasonable prices. It belongs in the prep. Food 3. Bouillon cubes and powder. This one sounds too simple to be on a list like this. It belongs here anyway. Bouillon cubes, compressed blocks of dehydrated meat or vegetable stock, salt, fat, and flavor compounds, have an effectively indefinite shelf life when kept dry. Commercial bouillon stored properly has been found usable at 10 years and beyond without significant deterioration. They weigh almost nothing, take up almost no space, and cost roughly 10 to 20 cents per cube, making them one of the most calorie per dollar irrelevant but value per dollar impressive items you can add to your prep. Here's the actual function they serve in a survival food context. They make everything else edible. A pot of plain white rice is nutritionally adequate and culinarily punishing in a way that compounds over days and weeks. A pot of rice cooked in broth made from 2 bouillon cubes is a meal. Dried lentils cooked in flavored liquid become something that resembles food you might actually choose to eat. The psychological dimension of food quality in extended emergency situations is real and well documented. Morale is a genuine survival factor, and people make worse decisions, take more risks, and cope less effectively when they're eating food they find actively unpleasant. Bouillon cubes are one of the cheapest possible ways to address that. Beyond flavor, bouillon provides electrolytes, particularly sodium, that matter during extended physical activity, illness, or hot conditions where you're sweating heavily. Sodium is the primary electrolyte lost through sweat, and in a world where sports drinks aren't available and you're doing hard physical labor, bouillon broth is a functional rehydration option. It's not the only one, but it's calorie-free, effective, and most people find it far more appealing than plain salt water. Bouillon also provides the liquid base for soups and stews that allow you to stretch smaller amounts of protein and vegetables across larger meals by adding volume and palatability. A can of sardines stretched across a pot of broth with lentils and rice will feed 2 to 3 people. Without the broth, it feeds 1 and isn't satisfying. Chicken bouillon, beef bouillon, and vegetable bouillon in powder form from brands like Knorr, or in paste form from Better Than Bouillon, which has a refrigerated shelf life of about 2 years after opening and significantly longer unopened, are widely available and cheap. The individual foil-wrapped cube varieties, stored in their original packaging in a sealed container, last essentially indefinitely in proper storage conditions. Add several boxes to your prep and rotate them into your regular cooking so you know which you prefer before you actually need them. Food 2. Canned salmon and sardines. Canned tuna gets all the attention in the survival food world. It's on every prepper list, every emergency kit guide, every YouTube channel that covers this topic. Canned salmon and sardines are nutritionally superior in almost every relevant way, and they're consistently overlooked in favor of the more familiar option. Here's the key difference. Canned salmon and sardines are both typically packed with their bones intact, which remain soft enough to eat after the canning process. Those bones are a dense source of calcium, a mineral that is genuinely difficult to obtain from a grain and legume-dominant survival diet. For children, whose bones are still actively developing, calcium deficiency is a serious concern over any extended period. For adults, low calcium intake over months contributes to bone density loss and increases the risk of fractures, a particularly bad outcome in a situation where medical care may be limited. Without dairy in your food plan, which is the likely reality in any long-term emergency, getting enough calcium requires deliberate planning. Canned salmon and sardines with bones solve this problem directly and cheaply. Nutritionally, a single 3.75-ounce can of sardines provides approximately 23 grams of protein, 370 milligrams of calcium, roughly 37% of the daily recommended intake for adults. Significant omega-3 fatty acids, essential for cardiovascular and neurological health, and high levels of both vitamin D and B12. Canned pink salmon provides similar protein levels and, if packed with bones, comparable calcium content. Both also provide iodine, which is essential for thyroid function, and is frequently insufficient in grain-based diets that don't include iodized salt or seafood. The shelf life of commercially canned salmon and sardines is officially listed as 3 to 5 years, but canned fish has been tested and found safe and nutritionally intact well beyond the printed date when stored properly in cool, dry conditions. Unlike canned tuna, which raises legitimate concerns about mercury accumulation with frequent long-term consumption, particularly for children and pregnant women, sardines and salmon sit low on the oceanic food chain and consistently test well below mercury thresholds, making them safer for daily inclusion in a survival diet. Cost is also strongly in their favor. A can of sardines runs between $1 and $2 and provides a complete serving of high-quality protein alongside multiple critical micronutrients. A case of 24 cans stored in a cool, dark location will provide months of nutritional support at a cost that most other protein sources can't match. Add them to your rotation. You might actually start eating them voluntarily, which is the real test of whether a survival food is realistic. Food 1. Hardwood ash lye and traditional preservation knowledge. This one isn't a food, it's a technique, and it's the most important thing on this list that almost no one talks about. Before refrigeration, before canning, before freeze-drying, the primary way humans preserved food was through combinations of drying, salting, fermenting, smoking, and chemical treatment. These weren't primitive guesses. They were sophisticated, accumulated knowledge systems refined over thousands of years of literal life and death feedback. Get them wrong, people died. Get them right, communities survived. The knowledge is detailed, it's well documented, and it's been almost entirely abandoned by the modern prepper movement in favor of buying sealed cans and freeze-dried buckets. The most powerful and widely used chemical treatment was lye, sodium hydroxide or potassium hydroxide, made by slowly leaching water through wood ash and collecting the liquid that drains through. The resulting alkaline solution, when used to cure and process certain foods, dramatically extends shelf life, neutralizes toxins, and in some cases transforms the nutritional profile of a food so significantly that it determines whether a population lives or dies on that diet. The practical application most relevant to survival food is nixtamalization, the process of treating dried corn with an alkaline lye solution developed by Mesoamerican civilizations over 3,500 years ago and still standard practice in traditional tortilla and hominy production. Why does it matter? Because corn that has not been nixtamalized lacks sufficient niacin, vitamin B3, in a bioavailable form. Populations that depended on untreated corn as a dietary staple historically developed pellagra, a severe niacin deficiency disease characterized by skin lesions, severe diarrhea, dementia, and death. This happened to hundreds of thousands of people in the American South in the early 20th century, people who were eating plenty of food but dying of vitamin deficiency because the wrong food was being processed the wrong way. Indigenous peoples of Mexico and Central America, who developed nixtamalization, never developed pellagra from corn-dominant diets, because the alkaline treatment releases niacin in a form the body can actually absorb. The Europeans who adopted corn as a crop without adopting the accompanying processing technique did develop it in enormous numbers for over a century before the nutritional science caught up to what indigenous practice had known for millennia. Beyond nixtamalization, traditional salt drying of fish, producing products like salt cod, which fed European navies and explorer voyages across oceans for centuries, represents a food preservation technique that can be replicated with basic ingredients and produces a protein source that lasts over a year without refrigeration. Properly prepared salt-dried fish can be rehydrated over 24 hours before cooking and retains most of its original protein content through the preservation process. Knowing these techniques requires no special equipment and no expensive supplies. It requires learning how food preservation actually worked before electricity, which is what the most experienced and historically literate preppers invest in. In a scenario where the grid is down and your canned goods run out, the person with that knowledge has an advantage that no amount of stored product can fully replicate. And those are 10 survival foods, and one essential technique that even well-prepared preppers tend to overlook. From nutritional yeast that closes critical vitamin gaps in a grain-heavy diet, to Pemmican that kept Arctic explorers functional for months, to the nixtamalization and salt-curing knowledge that let entire civilizations thrive before electricity existed, to sardines with bones that quietly solve a calcium problem most people don't realize they have. The rice and beans plan isn't wrong. It's a solid foundation, and nobody's going hungry on it in the short term. But a foundation isn't a complete structure. The foods on this list aren't exotic or expensive. Most of them are available at any grocery store, cost very little, and store for years. What they share is that they've been overlooked in favor of the more obvious options. And overlooking them leaves nutritional gaps, morale gaps, and knowledge gaps that show up at the worst possible time. The best survival food is the one you know how to use, have actually tasted, and understand well enough to build a diet around before you need to. Add a few of these to your rotation now. Try them in regular cooking, and find out which ones work for your household. That's a significantly more reliable approach than buying a bucket of something you've never opened and assuming it'll be fine. If you found this useful, hit that like button and subscribe. It genuinely helps the channel, and we put serious research into every video. Drop a comment below with the overlooked survival food you think we missed, or let us know which of these you already have in your prep. We'd genuinely like to hear from people who've actually tested some of these in real conditions. We'll see you in the next one.